Good morning, good evening to all of you from presumably around the world. Welcome to our session this afternoon here in Ghana at the moment. I will be your host for this session. My name is Chaiwe Mshao-Kosanuser, and I am representing the Sustainable Sanitation Alliance. I'm a moderator on the Susanna Forum, as well as a co-coordinator of the African Water chapter of the Sustainable Sanitation Alliance. Right, so we are here today with a very specific topic in mind that we are going to really dive into. And this session is particularly looking at driving professionalization and performance for a sustainable urban water cycle. We are going to run and discuss in detail up until about 4:48 in terms of time. And to get a little bit into what the session is about, we will, in this session, invite participants to reflect on the operationalization of holistic urban water cycle approaches and the strategies to drive performance at all levels. We will look at practical examples that will be used as problem-posing materials, and resource persons from different countries will chip in with their specific examples. So we do have case studies and examples from Zambia, Bangladesh, as well as South Africa. And I can see there's a number of people still joining the session. So it will be great for us to start soon, but it's always great to get the numbers going. There's a few more people that need to join. So we will allow a few participants to come in there. With that said, I'm happy to mention that we have, for start, two opening speakers rather, that will run us through the first part of our session. And these are Barbara Schreiner, who is the Executive Director from the Water Integrity Network. And we will also have Antoinette Kome, who will give us a bit of a background on what it really means, more or less framing the presentation, framing the topic, how professionalization and performance contribute to a sustainable urban water cycle. So I would love to take a little bit of time to invite Barbara to give us a little bit of opening words on what we are here to do this afternoon. Thank you
very much. Thanks very much. And yes, good day to everybody wherever you are in the world and whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. And thanks to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to make some remarks in this very important session. Let me start by diving right in with some facts and figures. For the first time ever, more than half of the global population live in towns and cities. And by 2050, that is expected to rise to 2/3, or around 6.3 billion people. The number of people who live in slums or informal settlements in cities is already over 1 billion, with 80% of that attributed to 3 regions: Eastern and Southeastern Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, Central and Southern Asia. While the proportion of people without access to safe drinking water in urban areas has been steadily decreasing over time, the actual number of people without safely managed services in urban areas has been increasing. Cities are amazing places of opportunity, of innovation, and they should enable the provision of services and a decent standard of living for people who are living in more concentrated arrangements. And yet the combination of increasing demands on water resources, increasing pollution, and the climate change catastrophe are causing water shortages for cities, while climate change is also driving more extreme floods and higher temperatures in cities. all of which affects water management. Unless we do something better or differently, the management of urban water resources and the future of urban populations in terms of access to water and the management of human waste does not look pretty, particularly for the large numbers of people who do now and will in future live in overcrowded slums with inadequate, expensive, or even non-existent water and sanitation services. You know, some years ago, Robert Gakubia, the previous head of the water and sanitation regulator of Kenya, when I was talking to him about improving integrity, accountability, and transparency in the water sector, responded to me by saying, all you're talking about is about acting professionally. And there are indeed strong parallels between professionalism and integrity, the use of vested powers and resources, ethically and honestly, for the delivery of sustainable and equitable water sanitation services. The question facing us is how, in practice, to harness professionalism and performance to achieve integrated urban water management, managing the overall water cycle, whether it's the recharge of groundwater, citywide inclusive and integrated sanitation and waste management, the greening of the city, managing in the city. And particularly, how do we manage this in resource-poor settings? How do we marry good governance with appropriate technical solutions in a holistic approach? And part of this has to relate to the effective use of limited financial resources. Very interestingly, the IMF has found that on average, more than 1/3 of the resources spent on creating and maintaining public infrastructure are lost due to inefficiencies. And in some countries, this is up to 50%, particularly, I'm afraid, resource-poor countries. These inefficiencies are closely linked to poor infrastructure governance. And better infrastructure governance could make up more than half of the observed efficiency losses. Our own work in WIN suggests that anywhere between 4 and 26% of costs are lost to corruption. More professionalized, accountable water and sanitation governance will substantially contribute to more financially sustainable water and sanitation systems in urban areas and enable better use of resources for developing and implementing an integrated approach. The change that is needed in cities to ensure the holistic and sustainable management of water and sanitation requires new ways of thinking, new approaches, and new roles and responsibilities for a wide range of stakeholders within the city. It's change that will take time and effort. There is no quick fix in what we're trying to do at the city level. And however much we need changes at the individual level, driving integrated urban water management and driving professionalism in this regard is ultimately a systemic issue. The competence, the professionalism, the ability to think out of the box of individuals in the system is important. But equally, if not more important, is the systemic and institutional professionalism. An institutional context, excuse me, that supports, nurtures, encourages, and even demands professionalism. An institutional context that, for example, removes the political interference in the appointments of WASH staff and appoints staff on the basis of competence and qualifications, that sets clear roles and responsibilities, sets clear KPIs, and holds managers accountable against those KPIs. KPIs that are focused on the holistic management of the water cycle and the elements that make it up. That takes action on corruption and gross mismanagement, that builds the capacity of staff and stakeholders to drive integrated urban water management, that strives for transparency and participation, and is ultimately open to change, to adaptation, and to embracing ideas from all stakeholders. Ultimately, if all of this is in place, we should be able to measure the success of integrated urban water management according to the water security of those most vulnerable, those living in slums in the brutal world of daily water poverty, according to the protection of their human rights in the face of the enormous water challenges facing cities. To paraphrase President Nelson Mandela, a city should not be judged by how it treats its highest citizens, but its lowest ones. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I really look forward to hearing the presentations and discussions in the rest of what I hope is going to be an extremely interesting session. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Barbara. That was beautiful opening remarks there. My three takeaways are, we're looking at limited resources, and we hope that we'll be able to get into that in discussions later. We're looking at good governance. I think that's a key point to note there. What are we doing in terms of interventions, especially around good governance? We're also looking at how this is not a quick fix. So obviously there's a lot that needs to be done, and it needs to be done systematically. And we hope that we'll be able to hear in the discussions how this systematic approach looks like. With that said, I'd love to invite Antoinette to pick up the next session. Antoinette, Head of Water, SNB, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I also have a presentation? Thank you. Yeah, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody who is there from different places in the world. We're really happy to have you here. I'm really happy with the topic as well, because professionalization and performance is something that I've been working on my whole career, and it's really something which is very close to my heart. And it's because I really believe that the changes in our world have to come from people, how people work in a professional way, and also how they work together in organizations, in well-performing organizations, and how these organizations work together and hold each other accountable. So I think that that change really starts with people. Now, this picture is from across the street where I lived in Nicaragua. And we did not have water for 3 months in a row. So I really know firsthand what it means to not have water. Next one, please. When we talk about professionalization and performance, it's for something, it's for an objective. And for us, this objective is greater water security for all. There's many different definitions of water security. I'm referring to one here. And you see immediately that this is not just about having water. This is about 4 dimensions essentially, where we're talking about the quantity and quality and accessibility, reliability of water use for different users in cities, particularly for drinking, but also for other processes and for businesses. We're talking about being able to live in a clean environment. So about the sanitation, hygiene, solid waste management, management of wastewater effluent, also that comes from different processes in the city. And water security needs also an acceptable level of water-related risks. Floods and droughts in cities are becoming more and more common. And without managing this in an adequate way, we can't really speak about water security. And last but not least, it also depends on the security of water resources in terms of the quantity, quality, and reliability of those water resources over time. So only when these 4 dimensions are addressed, we can really speak about water security. But what about the urban water cycle? Next one, please. Why do we talk about this word, urban water cycle? We all know, of course, the natural water cycle. But as Barbara already mentioned, urbanization is really modifying that natural water cycle, and that has quite nasty consequences. Next one. If you look at the way urbanization is modifying the urban water cycle, you see there is more runoff because there's more paved surfaces, less infiltration. That runoff, that bigger runoff, is often polluted by the many pollutants in the city. There is wastewater, which is discharged into the environment, rarely treated. We know that's 35% of wastewater ends up untreated in rivers and surface water. And there is a problem of heat waves because of the lack of green spaces and reduced evapotranspiration. And in addition to that, the city has also an influence on the water availability and water security in surrounding areas because it's a big water user and a big polluter. Next one, please. So we want to bring back that balance in the urban water cycle by looking more at the amounts of water that are extracted, where possible ways to reuse wastewater, to make sure that wastewater is treated before discharge, encourage infiltration, reduce runoff, and increase green spaces, as Barbara also said. Next one, please. So to do this, to find that balance in the urban water cycle, we need to integrate different services in water supply, sanitation, solid waste, drainage, and curbing floods and droughts. We need to look at the city as a whole, looking at the different places in the city, both spatially as well as the different people that live in the city. There may be areas which have wells or septic tanks, and there will be other areas which are connected to sewer, which are connected to piped water supply. There should be a coherence, a linkage between those different systems, and we can optimize also the relations between them. Of course, we should promote circularity wherever is possible, reuse of wastewater, of nutrients, and other resources where is possible. We need to do that. We need better use of data, evidence-based decision-making, with data coming from the local level and from the global level. And last but not least, we need better governance, regulation, and smart enforcement, because a lot of the problems in the cities are because of lack of accountability, and there is a need to bring stakeholders into compliance with what has been agreed in terms of how we manage the city. How are we going to achieve all that? Next one, please. So my biggest message on how we're going to achieve this one, I already said this, next one. It starts with people. It starts with people at all levels, and we need to invest in people and their systems. Next one. Next one. So that's individual people, their professional capacity in different places, the people who sit in different places, and those are not just professional employed people. Those are also people who are taking up leadership roles, unpaid roles, but who can also professionalize. It's their technical knowledge, it's also their attitude and their empowerment. Next one, please. And then it's the organizational capacity. How do different organizations function? How can they function more according to their role, fulfilling their entire role and not cherry picking whatever suits them best? How can we make the structures more effective and make sure that the hierarchy is not killing all initiatives or all feedback loops in that organization? Next one, please. And last but not least, we need to improve that interinstitutional capacity, that capacity of different organizations to work together in a system, hold each other accountable, know what they need to do alone and know what they need to do together. This is not about everybody doing everything together. This is about having a good architecture of how work is divided and where coordination and collaboration is needed. Next one, please. Yes, next one. So how are we going to achieve this? We can only achieve this by when we start understanding that system of stakeholders, their relation. Next one. Then understand the individual stakeholders and their mandate in that system and their constraints in performing. Have a process of strengthening their capacities and performance, and also share with them the progress that is made, because ultimately capacity development and performance is something which is done by people themselves. It can be encouraged, and there can be reflection about it, there can be accountability in terms of trying to push for that performance, but it will only come if really there is an buy-in and people want to achieve that performance. And this all together, next one, results in accountable systems, such as this system in Kenya around performance-based management of non-revenue water. I'm not going to tell you all the detail about it, but there are no magic systems without the performance of each of these people, organizations in this system. Next one. What are the dilemmas we're facing in those processes? Of course, when you're trying to push for change and you have multiple people working together in the same direction, it needs leadership. And that leadership, we all know, it's not a given. Sometimes after elections, everything changes. Everybody changes. The whole direction changes because we do not want to continue what the opposition has started. But that's a problem because the timelines for this kind of change towards an sustainable urban water cycle is a long timeline, and it requires continuous commitment. You will see the stories here. These are stories of 10 to 30 years of change. Staff retention is a problem. Once there is staff capacity, staff will have further opportunities, which is great for them, and we should not stop them. But how can we find ways to retain staff in those places, in those towns, not only in the capital city, to also achieve performance in those towns outside, for example, the capital city? Now, understanding the broad picture is important, but this issue of professionalization and performance will only happen if there's sufficient attention to detail. If somebody wants to go all the way to find out whether things work, because the devil is in the detail of it. And that requires a lot of persistence. And lastly, next one, it requires a real interest of how things work out in practice for the people who are involved and for the people who are affected. Next one, please. So we have 3 stories here for you. 3 stories of change in which professionalization and performance are key. 2 from Kustia in Bangladesh, from Lusaka in Zambia, and from Cape Town in South Africa. 2 cities, Cape Town and Kustia, from a municipal perspective, 1 city from the perspective of a commercial utility. I will stop here because I think I'm going over time.
Yeah, that's true.
I hope you will be, I hope you will enjoy those cases next. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Antoinette, for setting the scene very nicely. That should segue us really nicely into the next, or rather the 3 case studies that we will look at, the 3 examples that we will look at. And to give you a bit of insight into who and what sort of examples we're looking at, I'm happy to mention that, and before I do that, sorry, I think this is very important. Based on what Antoinette has shared, based on what Barbara has shared, and what is to come, we would like to point out that we will not be taking any questions for now, probably later in the break of rooms, but we are happy to take your comments. Those will not be entered on our Zoom link. There will be, or you are at liberty to put those in the pathway. That's the page that shows up before you enter this Zoom page. So you can go back to the sign-in option that led you to this Zoom link, and there is a chat window there that you can include your chats, your comments, your thoughts, your questions. Thank you. So I'll get into introducing our 3 speakers for the next couple of minutes. We will have the first example shared by Owen Micho from Lusaka Water and Sanitation Company, Zambia. He will share with us the milestones from the Zambia water and sanitation sector reform and key learnings from there. And post that, or after that, we'll have Miss Tamsin Farah lessons in mainstreaming resilience for livable waterway. And then we will have a third example that will be shared by Mr. Ranva Ahmad, the town planner from the Kushtia municipality in Bangladesh. And he will be sharing examples with the operationalization of urban sanitation services in Kushtia, Bangladesh. I hand over to Owen to start the initial presentation for us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Chayue, and good afternoon to everyone. I hope I'm audible enough. Yeah, thank you so much. Chayue, can you confirm that I'm audible enough? I could be speaking to myself.
Perfect, Owen. Loud and clear. We get you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so just to give just what I'm about to present, it will be, of course, as the title says there, it's reforms in the water sector and sanitation sector in Zambia. And my name is Owen, as I've already been introduced, and I'll get straight into the presentation. So we can move on, please. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so the background there on the reforms in the water sector, just to mention that prior to the sector reforms in 1994, the Zambian water sector was characterized by lack of guiding policy. There was low cost recovery, poor human resource, both in terms of quality and quantity, as well as decrepit infrastructure, which was dilapidated and weak. And there was very little or no investment in the sector itself in terms of network expansion. And that also was seen through lack of clear defined roles and jurisdictional responsibilities, which led to policy gaps and duplication of efforts in the sector, considering that there are different sectors in the water industry itself. So basically, there was no legislation to guide the water and the sanitation service provisions, and management of water resources was not handled in a more comprehensive manner. And in 1994, the government committed itself to transforming the water sector so as to ensure quality provision of water and sanitation services at an affordable cost and on sustainable basis. I think as I go on in the presentation, you will be able to see just that how has been done. And in 1997, the government passed a national water policy, which highlighted about 7 principles. I think I'll be able to outline what these principles led to. I can have the next slide, please. Yeah, so continuing with that, what we see within the water sector reforms itself is that in 1988, then now, because of the water policy that was developed, we saw an establishment of the biggest commercial water utility, which is Lusaka Water Supply and Sanitation Company, which has the mandate of supplying water to the capital city, Lusaka itself. And that commenced in 1990, and suffice to mention that after that also we saw then the establishment of the different water utilities in the provinces within the country. Then in 1994, there now we saw the formulation of the national water policy. And 1997, we saw the establishment of a national water supply and sanitation council. So this is a regulator that was established as a result of the reforms that were done. And basically the regulator there was meant just to separate the regulatory aspects from the executive policy functions within the water supply and sanitation services. Then in 2011, because of the same reforms that were done, we then saw the separation of water services from the water resource management and the establishment of water resource management authority. So basically that separation, so now the linkage of the water services, the water resource aspects, as well as the water supply sanitation services. Then in 2017, within the country, we saw the development of the Ministry of Water Development and Sanitation, because initially this never used to be a ministry that was basically dealing with water aspects in the country. Initially, it was just a department that was embedded in one of the ministries. Then in 2017, we saw, in 2018, we saw now the extended mandate for the CU to provide on-site sanitation, as well as fecal sludge management services. So this mandate initially was not there for the conventional utilities that are within Zambia. Then in 2018, then there was development of a regulatory framework for the urban on-site sanitation, as well as the fecal sludge management and the rural water services and supply, with the support, of course, of GIZ through the reformed water sector too. I may have the next slide, please. Okay, so now perhaps the question might be, what are some of the outcomes out of some of these reforms that have been done? So that really has brought about clarification of roles and mandates among the different actors that we have in the water sector. And that has led to improved coordination, reduced tension, as well as conflict and duplication of roles. So that these reforms has kind of helped to a large extent on those aspects that I've just mentioned. And there's been as well improved capacity, management skills, and predictability of the services that are being provided to our residents, especially in these peri-urban areas. And there's been also, as a result of that, reduction in the level of political interference, particularly in the setting of water tariffs and in the geographical distribution of the water services. So we see that initially government would sometimes be able just to make instructions as to how the tariffs should be. But because of these water reforms, now we have a regulator who stands independently, and they're able to do the job in a most efficient manner. The next slide, please. And of course, as with most reforms, there have also been challenges, and I'll just be able just to outline a few of some of these challenges. So the first one, of course, has been inadequate capital investment in water infrastructure, where demand of water services is increasing due to population growth, especially in the capital city. This is quite prevalent, and creation of CU has resulted in sort of disappearance of the state from water services sector. So usually this talks about, most of the responsibilities now, I think, are being spearheaded by the utilities, and then to some extent, you tend to see very little of the state influence in that. And then disappearance also of programs to support access to water services for the vulnerable, and reluctance to extend services to poor areas, improving services as only applied to high income levels. So we are seeing that the water utilities now are concentrated in high income areas. And then the poor households now have become more vulnerable as a result of that. And then there are people now that have come up basically to be able to exploit the water and the cost at which people are able to buy that water. The next slide, please. The next slide. Yeah, so my last slide there basically talks about some of the key reforms in the water sector, as well as the interventions that have been done as a support of GIZ through reform water sector too. So through that, there's been a support in terms of regulatory framework for the urban on-site and sanitation services and fecal sludge management, and rural water supply and sanitation services. So the other support has been, of course, in 2018, there was a joint water sanitation and environment sector review, which is a biannual report that basically helps in terms of improving performance, in terms of assessing what has been some of the challenges in the sector, which is basically done in a jointly manner. And then there's also been a support by local authority as well as providing input into the development of on-site and sanitation, and also the bylaws that have been there. Last but not least, of course, in terms of support from GIZ has been in terms of skills development, where there's been a skills advisory group that has been established, launched, and operational. And this was formed to address the challenges and the skills gaps in the water sector. So those have been some of the few highlighted support among the other supports that have been done in the water sector and in the water reform itself. I think I'll end there. Thank you so much.
Right, I'm going to assume that I can jump right in. Thank you very much to my colleague in Zambia. Right, so good afternoon and good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to share some of the City of Cape Town's lessons in mainstreaming resilience for livable urban waterways. Next slide, please. So Cape Town's resilience journey is intricately connected to the drought. The city's supply catchments experienced low rainfall, leading to water restrictions, and we only very narrowly avoided day zero. And this was between 2015 and 2018. At this time, there was a recognition that climate change is real and that action and a reevaluation of business as usual was needed. The Resilience Department, which I represent, was established in the middle of the drought as part of the Rockefeller 100 Resilient Cities. One of the department's first activities was to prepare a water resilience profile. So the graphic you can see on the screen is one of the outcomes of one of the workshops, and it identifies actions and collates ideas. And if you look on the far left, this is where the idea of livable urban waterways emerges for the first time. Next slide, please. So whilst the previous slide is aspirational and inspirational, this slide illustrates the benchmarking that sits at the back end of the water resilience profile, which was a data-driven process undertaken to shine a light on the areas that needed improvement. Two assessments were made. There's the qualitative on the left and the quantitative on the right. The quantitative summary, which is now in the middle on the left, shows the indicators and rates across 4 categories, starting with optimal and then going all the way down to poor, which is red. One of the 2 red indicators is protection of aquatic habitats and ecosystems. Next slide, please. This indicator connects to the livable urban waterways idea that has 2 aspects. The one is this idea of water sensitive design, and the other one is celebrating and reconnecting people, nature, and water. These ideas were integrated into the resilience strategy, the water strategy, and then the environmental strategy that have collectively provided a critical foundation from which we have been able to launch the implementation framework, which is where we are now. The Livable Urban Waterway Program was collaboratively developed by a catchment manager, a landscape architect, and an environmental scientist, showing the interdisciplinary and the multidisciplinary approaches we've adopted for this project. Next slide, sorry, program. So monitoring evaluation happens at 2 levels. It starts at the project and then it's also at the program level. So because the projects are very much still in the design phase, and we have 5 water and sanitation projects, and then there's also one that I lead, which is more kind of an urban project, urban water project. They're still very much in the design phase, so we haven't really implemented the monitoring and evaluation on the projects, but we do have a set of indicators that are very much part of the implementation framework, and they will be used when we get to that point in the project cycle. However, the program reporting has been ongoing for the last couple of years. Many of the projects are public spaces, hence the overlap between the 2 reporting processes. As you can see that there's an ED, an executive director, which is the highest level in the administration. So some is the Livable Urban Waterways action is directly reported to the Water and Sanitation ED, but there is also this overlap with public space. So the ED for spatial planning and environment is also a very important part of the reporting process. Next slide, please. So changing governance, some of the previous presenters have spoken about governance and the importance to recognize its role in the water system. We have looked at mainstreaming livable urban waterway concepts in a variety of ways, through policy, through program governance, and through other ways right at the bottom. There have been a number of important policy wins. The 10-year sector plan for water and the environment is a 10-year plan that identifies projects and also prioritizes budgets. So to have the program in that set of plans is super important. It's also in the IDP, which is the city's integrated development plan, which is the city's 5-year plan that guides our priorities for the political term. And our current IDP has just kicked off. We've also integrated livable urban waterways into some core projects. So these are planning and urban design and development projects within the city, which is super exciting because they've kind of moved beyond the open space, environmental and water space into the hardcore kind of planning space. Mainstreaming is practically managed through program governance, such as a steering committee where projects are discussed and lessons are shared. These conversations are supported by an advisory group comprised of internal and external parties. We've got the WWF, C40, ICLEI, etc., as well as a great group of academics and even some retired practitioners. So we have a lot of support coming in from the outside as well. And then I personally approach mainstreaming through my city work, but also through my professional bodies, hosting and curating webinars and events, etc., but then also teaching and publishing specifically also on the Livable Urban Waterways program. The city's Livable Urban Waterways team have also prepared a compendium of case studies that illustrate existing best practice within the city. And that's to highlight that this is not something new, it's something that we've kind of forgotten and that we need to remember and revisit those lessons that we've learned along the way, which is why we roped in retired practitioners who know a lot more than the rest of us do. Some of the other exciting mainstreaming is happening through community stakeholder engagements that are part of the current Livable Urban Waterway project implementation. And through these engagements, we're hoping to get further momentum. Next slide, please. So some of the lessons learned, and there are so many, but there isn't enough time. Champions are really important for driving ideas and finding places to land them. We have a number of champions across the city, but they all come together under the program lead, highlighting the importance also of a central governance structure of bringing people together and having a point that then coordinates. The framework is great for creating flexibility and enabling collaboration. Anything can be a Livable Urban Waterways project. It's just a question of whether they respond to the principles and can be measured. And then whilst it is great to have projects across the city, there is still the need for an owner who can provide the necessary accountability. Work is, however, not limited to the program owner and falls across the coalition of willing. And these are people who buy into the concept and are passionate about it. And finding these people and creating a space for collaboration is an important part of building that momentum. These people are ideally asset owners who are able to motivate and spend budget. Even though we had 3 demonstration projects at the beginning in the program, the initial implementation program, only 1 has progressed, which is fine because in the meantime, another 5 projects have been initiated and on the budgets, etc. And this illustrates the magic of momentum. And then lastly, resilience projects are oftentimes transversal and quite complex. So having the monitoring and evaluation located in a non-line place within the organization is super helpful for integration. And I thank you. Last slide.
Should I start? Should I start here?
I think
can you hear me?
You can start, Ranveer. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, you are.
We hear you.
Okay, okay, thank you. Good evening from Kustia Municipality, Bangladesh. And today I'm very happy to present my experience in my city, what I'm doing here in the World Water Week session. I am here to share the experiences on operationalization of urban sanitation services in Kushtia, Bangladesh. Next, please.
Next slide, please.
Next slide, please.
Should have moved.
I think I'm having some problem here. Okay, this is the presentation outline you can see. We first share the Kushtia's FSM journey, then the effort we have made to professionalize the emptying services, and the
I think we're having an internet issue, so I hope Ranveer will be back quite soon. I think we can move to the next slide already. Ranveer, if you hear me, perhaps you can turn off your camera so that you need less bandwidth. Rajiv, can you take over the presentation, please?
Yeah, thank you, Antoinette. We'll wait for Ranveer to come in. So in the meantime, as Ranveer was saying, in Kushtia municipality, the journey for fecal sludge management started way back in 2008, where with the introduction of mechanical emptying services as a small project, and also had a piloted co-composting of fecal sludge and municipal waste. And from then, the city had moved forward from a pilot to a citywide approach, fecal sludge management services, and also by developing a sanitation plan and a lot of capacity building interventions, as Antoinette also said, starting from individual to organizational and institutional aspect, how the municipality has to work at different level. And from 2016 onwards, the municipality, together with the other stakeholders, started deepening into each nodes of the sanitation service chain. They started working on the emptying fee, as Micho was also saying, regarding disturbances on announcing the service fees. But yeah, in the municipality, under the leadership of the mayor and very active staff members, they were able to work on each of the sanitation node in order to further professionalize the services. So till then, the services were provided by municipality, but later the municipality decided that it's better to outsource the services so that services can be better while the municipality can provide the full oversight. So the contract was provided to a private company initially for 3 years, but later realized that if the longer period contracts are provided to private sector with clear KPIs, it would be good for private sector also to plan the investment planning. In the meantime, city had also planned for a long-term planning for 2030. So, the journey has been quite interesting and challenging as well, but still there's a long way to go. So just to discuss about the efforts in terms of what the municipality has, what type of initiatives the municipality has taken. As I said earlier, currently they have provided the contract to private operator for 5 years. Generally, in the municipality system, it used to be an annual contract basis. But in that, there's a KPI and there's also a tariff has been agreed so that there's a trip-based tariff also addressing the poor in terms of the price for septic tank and the pit latrine emptying costs are different, being the pit latrine owners pays less compared to septic tank.
Rajiv, I think Ranveer has been able to join again.
Yes.
Ranveer, I suggest that you turn off your camera so that you have less problems with the uniqueness, less bandwidth, and please continue.
Okay, thank you. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Rajiv. These are the efforts to professionalize the services we are having in Kustia municipality. We have outsourced our emptying services to 8 foundation of private operators since February 2021. We have a contract period for 5 years and another provision for 5 years also. We have a trade-based tariff system. We are giving some subsidy to the poor peoples. We have some KPIs to monitor the services, and we have the provision of vehicle collection ratio to raise the target. We have a penalty mechanism here in the contract as well. Municipalities earning revenue, and definitely we have a dedicated FSM team working right now. Next, please. Yeah, this is the learning we are having, that is a shift from the municipal services by its own to private service providers. FSM is having a good business in Kustia, and private actors are slowly showing their interest across the country. We need some further professionalization of the services, and definitely clear service level agreement. We need to incorporate some issues. We reuse the pilot shows abundant opportunity, but there are challenges is upscaling them, and need for the innovative financing mechanism, because in Bangladesh the municipalities always fall short of financing in the sanitation sector. So we need innovative financing mechanism for expansion of the treatment facilities, the technologies, etc. And public toilets. Very recently, we have introduced 3 public toilets being outsourced to private operators, and they are doing very good, covering the operation and maintenance cost in Kustia. Next, please. The sanitation governance. We have operational health and safety guideline being approved by our council. We have sanitation bylaws being implemented, approved by the council, and according to bylaws, we have included some of the clauses of bylaws into our regular building approval process. We have circulated a public notice to every household for emptying their septic tank every year according to the Bangladesh National Building Code standard. We have prepared their database for 100% household through a survey. And the learning we are getting here is sufficient policies there, but implementation and enforcement is still weak. We are working on that. Lack of coordination, especially with the parallel government agencies working in Kustia, where there's a problem in data management system as well, and the municipal council rarely check those data analysis for their planning while having their council meeting. Next, please. The other challenges we are facing is the COVID-19 pandemic. Lack of recruit and competent staffing, because you know that for sanitation worker is not very much in Kustia, so we do not have any pool for the sanitation workers. We are increased our tax rate and recollection efficiency is also a big challenge. The uplifting livelihood of manual emptiers. Here, the municipality very recently has taken a very good step for making 105 low-cost housing for the 105 family members of the emptiers, and monitoring of the illegal septic tank connection with drainage is still a very big challenge in Kustia. We are trying to work with the district commissioner's office to remove those illegal connections. We have some technical limitation as well for service provisions, like a narrow road. The backwater can enter every road. Have some cleaning of solid fill bottom in the septic tanks, and we are arranging huge upfront investment for expansion of the sanitation infrastructure. So these are some challenges. Next, please. And thank you very much. And I'm inviting on behalf of our Honorable City Mayor and City Council to visit our resource recovery park in Kustia, where we are having Eras Bensos Limited for producing compost. We have help from SNV Netherlands Developer Organization, and we are working together to improve our sanitation coverage and service in Kushtia municipality. Thank you very much, and sorry for the interruption in the first stage. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we had quite some good presentations there, and very specific, very good examples. Each context has its unique approaches, its unique situations, and we can coexist in the sense of learning how similarities can be cross-shared, but also appreciate the differences. With that said, I think it's a perfect opportunity for us to give some insights, some inputs, and discuss these examples that were shared in a little bit more depth. So we are going to open up the group sessions. These group sessions will work in such a way that each of the participants will be assigned automatically. We have our technical team in the background that is supporting with that. So don't worry about which session you would need to go to. I'm sure each of the 3 sections will have an equal participation. The breakaway rooms, we'll have 3 in total. Room 1 will be managed by Owen Mitchell. Breakout room 2 will have Tamsin and Amanda, and breakout 3 will have Ranvar and Rajiv. These 3 rooms are representative of the 3 different examples or countries, with one Owen being Zambia. And just a reminder, Tamsin and Amanda are representing Cape Town, South Africa. And then finally, Ranva and Rajiv are representing Bangladesh. Right, great. Post that, we'll reconvene and proceed with our session. All the best in the discussions in the different groups. Thank you.
Sorry for the interruption again. Do you hear me, everybody?
Hello, yes, we're able to hear you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for the interruption again. We are having problem here in Kustia regarding the internet connection and electricity connections.
Great.
I'm really
well,
sorry for that.
I'm sure everybody is making their way back into the main room. A very brief breakout session, but I was in one of the rooms and very intense discussions, quite some level of key specific points and details shared in the breakout rooms. And we can now invite leads from the different breakout rooms to give a summary, in a very few words. About 2 minutes per participant should work pretty okay for us. Group one, I will go with Owen Micho to begin.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Chaiwe. I think from our group, we had an interesting discussion. I think we had Pavlo who was trying to inquire on how the tariffs are being set in Zambia. And I was just trying to mention to him that in Zambia, we have a regulator usually who are able to set the tariffs. So the different utilities that we have, they can make an application based on different conditions, which they can assess, have a parameter which they would basically look at. So if a utility is able to meet those parameters, then they can be able to approve a tariff. And when that tariff is approved, then you can go ahead to effect it. Then the other, I think, point of discussion was what is the influence of government in terms of that regulator. And I was trying to make mention to him that I think in the Zambian context, our regulator is quite stable. There's very little influence, unlike in the case that he was discussing for his country. And furthermore, I think I was also trying to inquire in terms of the percentages to say which is higher, either for sanitation or for water. And I was just telling him to say that in Zambia, I think sanitation is charged as a percentage of water. So you are billed for water, then sanitation is just a percentage of that. And but then we also have cases where you might have people who are not connected to the water. So, but we also have categories how we can be able to bill those individuals or the different households. So in a nutshell, I think that's how our discussion went, and would have loved to continue more and also to learn from different aspects. But in a nutshell, I think that was our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Owen. The very insightful presentation there, and very good comparisons. I think the notable thing to take is how government does not regulate tariff setting, and we can learn something from that in the sense of how we can create a free market economy where utilities are able to determine prices. It allows for performance. It allows for responsibility and ownership. I think those are some of the notable takeaways from that sort of example and setting. I will invite Amanda to give a summary from your discussions. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So in our group, we were zooming in into the Cape Town case. Tamsin had shared with us that journey, their water resilience journey, and specifically we were interested in how does the city look into ensuring that there's sufficient capacity in terms of the staff people, number of people, but also competencies that will ensure that they meet their goals. And interestingly enough, for the Cape Town case, although they've started this journey quite a long time ago, it wasn't so much about adding more people, but it was around shifting roles and responsibilities. It was around looking for the people that were willing to do things differently and setting up this coalition of the willing. And also being very creative around how water resilience initiatives were being crafted. I mean, a lot of the water-related projects in an urban system tend to be biased towards engineering solutions. So really thinking around names that are more inviting for other sectors, such as planners, such as those that are working on community issues, to feel included and to participate in such programs. So I guess the main takeaway was, within a big institution that already has a large number of people, find those that are willing to do things differently, find those that are willing to partner across departments as they try to do things differently at a city level and all the way across the basin level. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. I think that's quite notable there. The willingness to allow for diversity in approaches. That is definitely notable and is a very good takeaway. We hope that we'll have some time to capture a few questions here in the plenary so that there is some input that is provided to the overall participation and sharing of the three different cases. Rajiv, you have the floor, Bangladesh.
Thank you, Chair. We had a difficulty as Ranveer was, thrown out of the session, maybe because of the internet connection. But what we were discussing, there were questions regarding like whether the municipality, how the tariffs are set. So Ranveer was Ranveer explained municipality had developed a tariff setting guideline, and based on that, it's a progressive tariff plus the pro-poor tariff, because the septic tank and the pit latrine emptying costs are different. And the municipality is also charging sanitation tax, and they're trying to ring fence the funds so that they can use the sanitation tax, funds generated from the sanitation tax and the tipping fee for further expansion of the sanitation infrastructure. And the other point we wanted to discuss was, there was a question regarding the weak data management, even though Kustia is one of the champion in terms of urban sanitation in Bangladesh, but the municipality still feels that there is a weak data management. So in that case, it's basically meant was like, there has been various support in terms of data collection, different projects comes in, they do their baseline, and it's kind of like not available at one point. So everyone does their work, and this is not maintained, and it's not kind of centrally controlled. So municipality has invested in, they have initiated integrated municipal information system. So, and municipality is also requesting all the development partners and other stakeholders, as Ranveer also pointed out, that the coordination among the different stakeholders, including different government departments, is still a challenge for him. So, the discussion was more on the governance, like what type of challenges he felt in terms of professionalizing the services. I'll stop here, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rajiv. I think a lot can be learned from the Zambia situation in comparison, especially when you talk about the tariff aspects, as well as the data aspects. I think that's a key example, and that is happening in Zambia currently. And I'm sure Owen might attest to that. A lot of those practices are very similar to the Zambia situation. With that said, I'm sure there is some questions, some thought around what has been shared in these three cases. We would love to hear from you. You're happy to put a hand up, throw in a question, and one of the three group representatives would be happy to address it. We can also invite comments, if not questions. Is there anybody willing to bring something onto the podium? Great. Ranva, we see you. We see your hand. Please unmute, and we can have your camera on as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to mention one point in the context of the municipalities in Bangladesh here, is that privatization is very important. In municipalities, in one side is always fall short of money in the sanitation sector. The second one, it was a heavily subsidized service during when the municipality were doing by itself. So for all the municipalities in Bangladesh, privatization is very important. So I'm sharing this because I was having the experience of when municipality was doing the central services by its own, and now I am looking the private operators is doing the same. So it is very important and financially viable solution for the municipalities of Bangladesh to go for privatization. Thank you. Both the reuse, both the emptying services. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ranva. I believe that is a very broad discussion in itself. You know, subsidies, it's one of the key topics that we have been navigating around or trying to navigate around in this urban water discussion. And I don't believe there's, you know, one approach. There's several ways of looking at it. But maybe Barbara has something to add to that. I see your hand, Barbara. Please, you have the floor.
Thanks very much. And yes, it's an ongoing debate around privatization or remunicipalization, which is happening in some areas. In the breakaway group that I was in, the role of the regulator was briefly touched on. And I, without going into the merits and demerits of privatization in any detail, I do think it's important to recognize that the role of the regulator is critical. It's critical anyway, but when the private sector is involved, having a strong regulator is extremely important. I think if we look at what has happened in the United Kingdom, what is happening at the moment, where they have really privatized their water hugely in England and Wales, and they have undermined the strength of the regulator over the years. And there is vast breaching of the rules and regulations going on by the private companies, massive pollution of rivers. And so I think we really do need to understand the role of the regulator as being critical in this environment.
Right. Thank you for that, Barbara. I think that's also a very key point to bring out regulatory strength. How can the regulator ensure that private sector compliance issues are properly managed? When you're looking at it from our perspective here in Africa, that is something that we have been discussing quite a bit. We're trying to establish how we can improve governance systems in the regulatory environment to strengthen the roles of these regulators to be able to handle private sector and other obligations that they are provided with. Do we have any other final thoughts? I think we have a minute left before we can get into the closing of this session. It's been a beautiful discussion. Maybe one more comment, and then we can close. Thank you, Rajiv. I see your hand. Please, you have the floor. Thank you.
Just to add on and follow up regarding the role of regulator, just wanted to share the example we have in Zambia. Like, I mean, with Novasco and the commercial utility, they have developed a delegated management model through which the private sector can come in, signing the delegated management model with the private sector in terms of even the manual emptiers, I mean, who have been provided with mechanical emptying services, right? And Novasco has also supported in terms of developing a cost-based tariff system. So the CU, the commercial utility, while they sign the delegate management model with the private companies, they agree on the tariff as per the guidance from Novasco. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv. That is indeed the case in Zambia, and we've seen a lot of strength and a lot of effort from the regulator here in Zambia with respect to how they have owned and created stepped up their own responsibility towards private sector, particularly in the sense of standards, development of standards. I think that's one very notable approach that they've used. I won't spend so much time as we are now getting into our closing. It's been a really fruitful engagement. Of course, time is never enough, and we can always bank on furthering this discussion in other platforms that are available to us, like the Sustainable Sanitation Alliance platform, Susanna Forum. We can have the discussion running there. Take note of the Rural Water Supply Network platform, D groups. I'm sure we'll be able to also push the conversation forward there. I would love to invite, as a last speaker for today, Smita Rawat, to give us her closing remarks and sum up the discussions that we've had today. Thank you. Smita, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chave, and thank you to all the speakers who joined to share their experiences from all the countries. Thank you to Owen, Ranveer, Tamsin, Antoinette, Barbara, to share specific examples from Bangladesh, South Africa, and Kenya on, basically showcasing how important dividends can be gained by investing in professionalization, by investing in regulatory reform, and by investing in capacity building in order to not only tackle the gaps in meeting the basic needs in water to sanitation, water security issues, and water risks that are emerging due to climate change in rapidly urbanizing context where the demands are outpacing the ability to actually plan and deliver services. Therefore, I think it is, clear and incumbent on us, based on these examples that we have heard today, that to ensure a water secure future, we need to build new skills and capacities, both at the individual level, where we capacitate water professionals, managers, and service providers to account and plan for future uncertainties, but also new organizational structures that will encourage performance-based management, promote integrated approaches to managing water across the water supply system, the stormwater system, the wastewater system, and also encourage more institutional coordination between national governments, regional governments, and local governments, as was highlighted in the case of Zambia with all the reforms that have been instituted, how regulatory roles and execution roles have been sufficiently demarcated and highlighted, and therefore supported improved water cycle management and water systems management. So in summary, I would just like to say that this, it is important. It might, sometimes we are more focused on investing in the hard infrastructure and less focused on investing in the soft infrastructure. But as you can see from these many examples that have been identified, that we need the resources, the human resources, the people matter. And if you don't invest in the human resources to support these new approaches for water management, which are essential, which promote more circular water management, more reuse, recycling, recharge, and as Ranveer was highlighting, new approaches to revenue recovery, new streams of revenue to ensure financial sustainability of water services providers. It is absolutely critical that we look at it from both a governance perspective, from a financial sustainability perspective, while looking at emerging risks and how to address them. Therefore, I would just like to conclude by saying that there is no water to waste, and there is wastewater and stormwater to integrate. And we all need to have a joint approach to make this happen by supporting ongoing capacity building in order to advance work and develop new approaches and innovative approaches to manage water more effectively and more efficiently in our urban water cycle. Thank you, Chawe, and thank you all for joining and for sharing your comments through chats and through your engagement in the breakout sessions.
Wonderfully done, Smita. Thank you very much for those closing remarks and for summing it up very nicely. And thank you to everybody. We wish you the best with the other sessions during the course of the next week plus. And have a lovely afternoon, morning, evening, and goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much.
Thank you.